I'll begin with a slide which is titled Drone View. This is a November 2012 instance of a drone strike. Identity, location, condition, photograph, target. I should have prefaced that with the knowledge that it contains images that should actually disturb all of us, and if they don't disturb us, I wonder why. This is the street view. So we saw drone view. This is the street view. Palestinians extinguished the fire that engulfed Ahmed Jabari's car after the airstrike. Didn't look so bad from the top, did it? Just looked like we were swatting a fly. At street view, the collateral damage is obvious. Soon after, an infographic was launched by the IDF, the Israeli Defense Forces. It provided a picture of the dead man, a leader of Hamas's brigade, with large writing on it that said eliminated. Soon after, the Jerusalem Post also identified the same infographic, and the headline read, IDF and Hamas wage war on Twitter. That's because the image was loaded onto Twitter. But look at how Jerusalem Post actually depicted the image, going back to what we learnt yesterday. The forehead is cut off of the individual. The name has disappeared. He's nameless. The emphasis is of the word eliminated. It's reduced to an assassination, or reduce the assassination, I should say, to a cyber war, but there is a real person who has died, right? And not only that, several people died in that drone strike, not just one. The caption read, Hamas takes over channels 2, 10 on satellite late at night. IDF graphics department works overtime. IDF, Israel Defense Force, has an infographics department, and they are working overtime on Twitter. As I was scrolling down the page, I saw this image here of the ANZ Bank, and immediately my eyes just glossed over this image, thinking it was another advertisement. In fact, it's an infographic. It's the pros and cons. It's like a depiction of one medical health insurance company to another. We've gone to that level of detail. What has the IDF done to minimize harm to civilians in Gaza? Phone calls, leaflets, aborting airstrikes, roof knocking, pinpoint strikes, they've done everything. What has Hamas done to minimize harm to civilians in Israel? Nothing. Has Twitter become a cyber leaflet, a propaganda mechanism? Potentially. Here we have the IDF. We recommend that no Hamas operatives, whether low-level or senior leaders, show their face above ground in the days ahead. This is coming from the Israel Defense Force on Twitter, waging war and conflict on Twitter. The response by the Qassam Brigades, our blessed hands will reach your leaders and soldiers wherever they are. You opened hell gates on yourselves. Soon after, Jabari was assassinated. On the right, not to incite any ultra-historical significance, but these are the leaflets that were dropped by the Nazis, warning of mass destruction if people didn't comply. We've taken those paper leaflets and put them online. Something that we study in transnational events is the notion of global and local at the same time. I agree with you. Who is in control of the shipping containers, of what's in the containers and how they go around the world? But it's become like a tit for tat, but also there's a third-party intervention. When the drone strike of Jabari was put up by the IDF, YouTube pulled that video, that 10-second video. They pulled it offline, only to bow down to pressure and reinstate it. So who are these constituents? Do we actually know who they are? Are we providing a value chain? Do we start at that level? What about the local constituents, those on the ground nearest the disaster or the event? And there is a mind and body connection here, a type of cyber war playing out. There are staff behind Twitter in the Israeli Defense Force and the Qassam Brigade actually sending each other messages. Why are they sending messages on Twitter? Why are they uploading Instagram pics? Why do they have Facebook presences? What is it about this online social media? Is it the weaponization of social media? Is it the adoption of emerging technologies for something they were never intended for? I thought Facebook was about sharing your social network, not about threatening somebody else, about death and destruction. There is a psychological wellness that comes with that. And there's asymmetry based on the terms of service and those who govern the terms of service. I'll pull you off. I'll take your images off if I disagree with them. But if there's a lot of pressure from particular stakeholders, possibly I'll put them back on. And the way you interpret the terms and services and the terms and agreement, well, that just depends on your life world and who you are and where you are. So there are local responses to block content to have global reach. They have global implications. But we didn't start waging war on Twitter and social media back in 2012 in November. We started in 2009. Headline: Hamas sends text messages to Israeli cell phones. 1st of the 1st, 2009. Telephone messages and breaching the enemy's radio frequencies are just some of the surprises we have for the Israeli side. You will be very surprised by our military and technological capabilities. War was about to get personal. It's not about an army. It's about getting into the psychology and the psychological well-being of the army officer. It gets personal. Tit for tat. Israel intimidates Gazans via text messaging. So here the Hamas did it to the Israelis, and here the Israelis do it back. This tit for tat. Are we kids in a school playground? Aren't these lives we're dealing with? It's interesting why an army would decide to use Twitter. Many of you may not know that you can do incredible data mining with Twitter. In fact, you can even do big data. You can predict events. If you analyze tweets, analyze where they came from, analyze who sent them, analyze who favorited them, analyze who retweeted, analyze the hashtags, analyze the hash clouds, and conduct geosocial intelligence on these. And so our Qassam Brigade began doing tweets long before the IDF. What was the impetus for the IDF to go online? Because they felt slighted that they weren't on social media? Of course not. They were gathering human intelligence, geodemographic data about where their proponents were, where their opposition was, where their supporters were, and how they could bring on a global constituency in order to get more support. The same goes for Hamas. October 2011, IDF. You can even look at how many tweets they sent per day and when they sent them. In fact, you can even sway sentiment. You can put in other tweets. You can be an anonymous person. You can be anyone. It doesn't matter that you're invisible. You may as well be the IDF. You may as well be a US lobby group. You may as well be anyone on the internet. The internet doesn't know you're a dog or that you're not a dog. You can be anyone. You can sway sentiment, and you can see how the sentiment changes the cranking of the wheel in the system just by analysing the data. Al-Qassam began in July 2010. IDF tweet timeline. As the crisis unfolded near Jabari's assassination and strike, we can see the number of tweets escalated over time until there was a ceasefire. Same goes for the Qassam Brigade, but less number of tweets over time. We can tell you when the tweets were sent, the tweet density, and this is in my local time, back in 2012, but you can also do that for other local times, and you can see where there's a lull for some reason in tweets. This is free, by the way. Go to Tweet Stats, but there's about 15 to 20 freely available analyzers out there This tells us about patterns of striking, patterns of response, predicting patterns of response, testing the waters, and then seeing what the reaction is. Here's the Qassam Brigade. Obviously, they don't have the amount of resources that the IDF do to send out the number of tweets. They go to sleep. Remember, this is my local time, so they probably went to sleep between 12 and 4 a.m. in the morning. Armies have to sleep too. We can even look at the handles, the Twitter handles. Replies to, well, 5% of the tweets came from this group of people. The IDF know they received replies from these guys. And if you know the handle and you have some intelligence, you can track back the IP address to the location. That's not hard to do. You strip the tweet of an identity even, and the location is more important than an ID. We can see that the IDF had an interface where they used TweetDeck, sophisticated Hootsuite, Twitter from the iPad, the web, and so forth. And here were the retweets by their own people. Qassam Brigade, on the other hand, were more poorly supported. They didn't have Hootsuite and other steroid applications for social media. They used the web and sometimes the mobile web, which tells you that their group is fixed to a location, right? That's what it tells you. And you can see the average daily tweets and so forth. I won't labour on these, only to tell you that even tweet clouds, and they use different terminology, and you can monitor these. You just look up words and you bring in from the public data, you bring in the content and the handles, and you can do sophisticated analysis just on the terms. It's content analysis, everyone. Hash clouds, IDF, and Qassam. You can even look at followers, and in a very short space of time, the IDF had an increase. They had a great number of supporters come on board within the year that was in 2012. So on the surface, it looks like the military and law enforcement are just publicly posting tweets. They're opinion leaders, and they can mobilize resources quickly in the Qassam Brigade's case. It provides crowdsourcing, and it generates data that can be analyzed. And the citizen becomes the reporter. It's user-generated content. They're a data donor. They're telling everyone what it's like at street view level, and maybe actually at person byte level. So beneath the surface, however, there's really sophisticated situational awareness going on with these tweeting. The IDF are not spending that many resources just to make nice messages back in reply to Qassam Brigade and their other entities. It's deep-seated propaganda for both these sides. Sentiment analysis, content analysis, discourse analysis. Let's sway the international sentiment one way or the other. And all of these vectors are points for attack. Every time you see an individual pop up, whether they're real or not, it's a vector for attack, whatever that might be. The IP address of the terrorist, and I go back to seeing an image of when I was footage when I was 15 years old and quite confused. Yasser Arafat and Sharon were calling each other terrorists in almost the same dialogue, with the same reporter, that terrorist, no, that terrorist. And we continue this notion of tit for tat in social media. Get inside the head of soldiers, make it personal. In refreshing my statistics for this talk, because the other ones were taken from November 2012, I quickly went to some Twitter summary stats. November 2012, 7,800 tweets by the IDF. In February 2014, 10,500. They were only following 86 entities, and now they're following 104. They're followed by close to 235,000. In a space of a year, another 35,000 people have come on board, some of whom are my friends. The Qassam Brigade tweets in 2012, 4,471. Following only 7 people or things or groups, followed by almost 40,000 people. And then I went looking for February 2014, and does anyone know why there are question marks there? Ah, that third party. So here we have the profile of the IDF, and I went looking for Qassam, 9th of January 2014, Twitter account suspended. But that won't stop Qassam. They've come back, and they've created another profile, added an S, minus an S, conjoined the word Al-Qassam. They have 4 different accounts going at once. You can't stop social media, just like you can't stop science. So the whole idea about why Twitter suspended the account of Qassam Brigade, the discussion is there, I'll leave that for another time. But the response by the Qassam Brigade, who have come out with the Twitter handle Qassam without double S, just one S, Brigade, hashtag Israel will not prevent us from delivering truth to the world. Follow at Qassam Brigade for updates. Hashtag Gaza, hashtag Palestine, hashtag Egypt. Let's drag Egypt into this, hashtag news, and so forth. Just by analysing the state actors that have been brought into this, you can understand geopolitical events at a very global and macro scale. As my husband reminded me, go back and watch Dr. Strangelove, Katina. My husband is MG Michael, by the way, a fellow academic of mine at Wollongong Uni, an ethicist, a Sydney Uni graduate, and a theologian. He said, you've got drone view, you've got street view. What about the FPS, the first-person shooter? He said to me, it's the gamification of war, not just by those at war, but by third parties. So let's go and see a scene from Dr. Strangelove of what first-person shooter looks like, or first-person view. Not drone view, not street view, but first-person view, person view. Here's Slim Pickens depicted riding the bomb to his and our destruction in Dr. Strangelove, How I Learned to Stop Worrying and Love the Bomb. So what you see is Slim Pickens riding the bomb. It looks like a phallical, to be honest with you. And he's riding the bomb, and he's waving his hand going, yeah! And has absolutely no idea that he's going to hit the earth and crash. And when he does crash, because he's riding the bomb, poof, the atomic bomb goes off. It's a very effective scene. And it depicts where we're headed potentially if we continue with this tit for tat. So the coming of the age of Valence. If we are going to go to personalisation in war and personalisation in everything, and we're going to try and get in the head of individuals, let's go with an implantable chip. We don't need luggables anymore. We don't need wearables. Let's just go and implant everyone for security purposes. A type of black box recorder, not just in the super aeroplane, not just in the vehicle, not just on your head if you're a motorbike rider, but let's put it in our body. Let's have identity, location, condition, and even store photographs. Just like this invisible network is starting to form through the optical routes. We also have the wireless, invisible identity, location, condition, which we've termed Valence. It's Big Brother on the inside looking out. It no longer can make mistakes, but be made in private. So all your things will be replayed in front of you, just like a drone view or a person view, as this data is recorded when these things actually enter our bodies. It provides touch points with everything we touch around us, and it's an all-hazards approach to security. I don't know what my neighbour down the road's doing, so just in case, I might safeguard myself. Economic, political, social and environmental securitisation. Because if they make one wrong move in this new area and arena of visibility, I'll make sure they pay for it. It is a tit for tat, but this kind of data is prone to misinformation, misrepresentation and information manipulation. And the questions I'd like to conclude with quickly. There is no real winner in War and Conflict 2.0. And what might War and Conflict 3.0 look like? Are we going to unleash those drones on Earth as packed mules like Boston Dynamics? It's an Uber analytics with qubits, it's predictive models, it's big data versus little people, it's real-time tracking and monitoring of the populace through electronic chronicles. Will we give up our freedoms, rights for the hope of war turned peace? Will we declare total transparency because we feel insecure and unsure? Will we destroy the very thing we are trying to protect, our security, by building it up because we will relinquish power to these autonomous agents, the weaponization of emerging technologies? MG Michael calls this the axis of access. Those people, the little people will be surveilled. The little people will have total information awareness occurring. They'll be demanded with transparency. It's the ones who are corrupt, the ones that have always been in power, who will be able to hide and become invisible in this new digital chronicalization. There will become more and more difficult ways of identifying when someone has done something that is corrupt, because digital footprints can lie. Placing our faith in an infinity machine to make things better is not the answer, because we all know the world is finite. We all know our lives are finite for now, independent of what the AI specialists tell you and Ray Kurzweil describes in heightened delusions of grandeur. Are we walking into an Uber hell, a war game that never ends? And if we continue with this tit for tat, it's going to be next that we're not going to need soldiers. We'll just put the drones out there to fight against each other. And watch out the next time you're jaywalking near Broadway, because you might get a tap on the shoulder by a drone, a packed mule that says to you, "Excuse me, sir, you're breaking the law." But if we keep going, where are we going to stop? It's the gamification. It's that game you never win. You are the victim. You lose out. What will be real and what will be unreal will be increasingly difficult, more difficult to observe. And although I'd love to show you a picture of this packed mule, there it is. It's called Big Dog. That's a 2010 image. Google just bought packed mule. You can't trip it over, and if you do, it just gets back up. It can carry payload, and the payload could be bombs. And it might be your new soldier. This could be Web 3.0. Well, you don't need to kill people. Just unleash these monsters out there. And finally, because we are all sleeping and zonking out on games and on the internet, are we going to get so zonked out that we just plug ourselves into the grid, refuse to live off the grid occasionally, and just zonk out on those augmented reality glasses because life's too hard to handle and Web 3.0 has gone wild and the pack mules are outside? What is our destiny here? Quantum or not quantum? Is it faith in the machine or faith in ourselves? And that's what Uncle Chika said. We are human beings. Thank you. Manipulation, it'll always happen with those in power if the wrong people get into power. Accountability, we need more of it. And individual freedom, I think we've lost at least half of it. I just want you to think about how much time we each spend on the internet every single day of our lives and how much we actually spend with each other every single day of our lives.